Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Kantrowitz, Senior Director of Cultural Arts at the J, where you can always find your Jewish Center. Thank you for joining us for the book launch of Theater Kid and the 2025 Lenore Marwell Detroit Jewish Film Festival, our 27th season, now through May 11th, supported by the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit. A huge thank you to all of our generous donors who have made this evening's event possible. Goldfield sponsor, Belfour USA Group, Silver Film sponsor, Hebrew Free Loan Detroit, Tamarack Camps, and the West Bloomfield Township Public Library. Bronze Film sponsor, Henry and Delia Myers Library, Jewish Federation of Detroit, Affinities Pride, sponsor the Berman and Detroit Jewish Book Fair. If you have pre-purchased a book, please know they will be available for sale outside. And if you have not picked it up, right outside the door after the event, you can pick up your copy of Theater Kid. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce tonight's special guest. Jeffrey Seller is one of the masterminds behind the Tony Award-winning musicals Rent, Avenue Q, In the Heights, and Hamilton. His shows have garnered 22 Tony Awards, including 4 for Best Musical, and his Broadway productions and tours have grossed over $4.6 billion and reached more than 43 million attendees. Jeffrey is the only producer to have mounted 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning musicals, Hamilton and Rent. He also revolutionized theater accessibility with the $20 ticket lottery for Rent, making theater accessible for many people. Jeffrey is an alumnus of Oak Park High School and the University of Michigan and will always consider himself a Detroiter. Jeffrey Sills can be currently seen in the HBO original series, The Gilded Age. He received Tony and Drama Desk Award nominations for his performance in The Scarlet Pimpernel on Broadway. Other Broadway and New York credits include War Paint, Living on Love, Little Shop of Horrors, Drama League Award, Nantucket Sleigh Ride, Mac and Mabel, Hey Look Me Over, Lady Be Good, Music in the Air, and Carnival for Encores. National tours of The Addams Family, The Secret Garden, Into the Woods. Regional starring roles at La Jolla, Long Wharf, Westport, Kennedy Center, South Coast Reprise, and California Shakespeare Festival. Other TV and film credits include Law & Order, Ghosts, Christmas on the Square for Netflix, Katie Keene, Chicago Justice, CSI, The Closer, Numbers, Will and Grace.
How nice to see you all. Thank you so much for coming out on a rainy Tuesday night, but a special Tuesday night.
Hi, I'm Sills. I'm not Jeffrey Sills. Let's just be clear.
I'm Douglas Seller.
There you go. How lucky are we to have this gentleman, this megastar? It's my pleasure.
How lucky am I to have this man? I mean, I should be interviewing him.
Stop. I mean, come on. This guy has changed the... Anyway, let me tell you. I have read the book, and it's compelling and intense and very frank, and you will really enjoy it. It's so easy to recommend it. I went like that, and I mean, he didn't even hit... I'm sure there's going to be a sequel, because there's so many things he didn't hit on. But let's begin, shall we?
With pleasure.
Okay. So Jeffrey is, as I am, a Detroiter, and started in a very modest setting. Tell them what the Cardboard Village is. It was the term or a place I had not known about.
It's the first 2 words of the book. And I made a deep, heartfelt decision that the only way through the pain of those 2 words for me growing up was to start right there. And this was the pain. Many of us know Oak Park and have extraordinary warm feelings about our life in Oak Park. And when I was born, the adoptee who came home on the 4th month of my life, my parents, Mark and Caroline Seller, lived in what they called the Manor, which was that nicest neighborhood on 10 Mile Road, the neighborhood where the houses weren't all the same. And they were living high on the hog, and it wasn't long thereafter that my dad bankrupted the business and they had to move. And then we moved to the Key School elementary area, and we lived in a lovely house with a beautiful basement with a bar in the basement, and we'd play at puppet shows, and we watched The Man on the Moon from the family room in the back, and then that was when my father had his motorcycle accident, resulting in aphasia, brain damage, welfare, and having to leave that house. And then we moved to the Lessinger area behind the AMP. And you know, I just have this memory that there was this giant dresser that was in the living room the day we moved, and I was dancing around the dresser because when you move and you're 6, you think everything's great. But over the next 2 years, I learned everything's not great, that we weren't where we were. And that's when the kids started saying, you live in the village? You live in Cardboard Village, right? And they said Cardboard Village because the houses, instead of being made of bricks, were made of the tar shingles that you normally see on the roof. They said Cardboard Village because they were joking that you had nowhere to go if there was a tornado because there were no basements. And we all know how many times Channel 7 News would tell you to go to your basement because there's a tornado watch or a tornado warning. Well, we had nowhere to go because we lived on concrete slabs with a carport instead of a garage. And I had so much shame that I would be found out, that people would find out I live in Cardboard Village. That I, in deciding to write this book, struggled with where do you begin, and I could only begin with those 2 words because I thought if I work through it, maybe I'll stop being ashamed.
Do you think that it was a very difficult childhood because of your dad's accident and what that caused between them? Did they have it was a difficult relationship, which you'll obviously read and see that he survives and excels in spite of what he was put through. Was their marriage good and warm before the accident, or was it always troubled?
It was always tempestuous. Does anybody know anyone who has a tempestuous relationship? It was always both manic and crazy and sad, and I always loved watching 60 Minutes on Sunday night with my mom and dad. And I had this, it's a recurring motif in the book of us watching 60 Minutes. And I just remember my dad sitting and rubbing my mom's feet because she would have to work all day on her feet as a clerk at Cunningham's Drugs.
Everybody knows all of these references.
And so and my father could be funny and gregarious and wonderful at the same time that he was impoverishing the family, failing as a provider, not showing up in the right place at the right time, and betraying my mother. And this is our life.
With an older sister.
With my sister Lori Gates, who's here tonight.
Hi, Lori.
Nice to see you, my love.
And a younger brother comes later.
And my younger brother, Aaron, who comes when I'm about to have my bar mitzvah, and Lori's about to have a sweet 16, and my 36-year-old mother announces she's pregnant, and I thought, she is too old to have a baby.
And she was very conflicted about it, about having another child. It wasn't something
she was not a young 36. You know, we think of 36 differently now, don't we?
I just had my 36th, and I... So, was the home a Jewish home?
And bizarrely, it was a Jewish home. And by that I mean that my kindergarten year was the year that my father had this just colossally tragic motorcycle accident. The tire blew out and he hit the ground wearing his helmet, but he hit head first on I-94 somewhere between Ann Arbor and I think Kalamazoo, and was rushed to St. Joe's Hospital in Ann Arbor. And I don't remember, I can remember every single teacher from first grade on. You can test me. I cannot remember the name of my kindergarten teacher because that year was the blur. But having said that, we also, my mother and Lori and I both went to Temple Israel my kindergarten year for Sunday school, and I went to Temple Israel for Sunday school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade.
Through 12th grade.
Yeah, well, there was a religious school.
So they didn't let you stop going to Hebrew school after your bar mitzvah?
They would have, but I don't quit.
There you heard, that's the secret, ladies and gentlemen. That is the secret for the shows that have the Pulitzer. So did she light candles? Was there a Shabbos?
No, we didn't have
Okay.
Shabbos. God, no.
Okay.
I'm
But
not.
you went to Hebrew school.
But I went to Hebrew school, and
Bar mitzvah.
I had the bar mitzvah, and I had that Temple Israel in my life once a week from age 5 to age 17.
Was it a positive place, do you think? Oh, because when I think of Shaare Zedek, a beautiful place.
I love that we're going to have a conservative perspective
Yeah, because I am a big Jew.
and a reform perspective. So
I didn't really look forward to Hebrew school. I hated it. And so when they said you can quit after bar mitzvah, I did.
you
But
hated it because...
I don't know. I just felt out of place. I was tired after regular school, and we were 3 days a week from 4 to 6, and I just wanted to go home, and I didn't feel like I was learning anything. I mean, when I look back, I'm glad that structure was in my life, but I wonder, do you look at it and think of it positively, those times at Temple Israel?
No.
I'm sure everything's changed, and all the kids love it now.
I have to tell you, many of you know, I have 2 beautiful children, Tommy and May, and I remember a Saturday morning where now our kids are in religious school when they're 10 and 11 and 12. My kids are now 21, 22. And my son will not get in the car, and I said, Josh, get the car and bring it to the front, and then I picked up my screaming, crying son, and I carried him into the car to take him to religious school. So no, I don't think anything's ever changed.
I can understand.
However, we do know from all these wonderful articles, thank you, that Temple Israel unlocked something without which I don't know if we would be here,
For sure.
the theater.
For sure. Absolutely. And to that end, do you feel like, well, the first experience you have directing or being in shows, will you just talk for a second about Oliver and Stagecrafters? So you learn about...
Yeah. So when I am in the 6th grade, there is a transformative teacher in the 6th grade music room named Miss Shively. And somehow I imbued Miss Shively with motherliness and music and drama. And I used to go, and I would bring my best friend, Bruce Rosen, who was a total jock, baseball, football. But we would go to the boys' ensemble practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:30 in the morning before school. And that's where I first learned I'm getting married in the morning. That's where I first learned there's nothing like a dame in 6th grade. And then Miss Shively. And then there was a Pops concert that winter, and I decided that Bruce and I are going to try out for the Pops concert. And they're going to choose 5 acts from the students to go along with all the choirs, but we're going to probably not get in because we're 6th graders, and the 7th and 8th graders are going to get the acts. And I get this crazy idea. I see this, one of my favorite episodes of The Brady Bunch. Love The Brady Bunch. Brady Bunch has a chapter in the book. You got to read it. And in one of these great chapters, Marcia and Carol are doing a fun number for the talent show called Together Wherever We Go. And I don't even know what that's from. I just know it's a fun number. So I now have to go find the music for Together Wherever We Go.
And you're in 6th grade. This is
Sixth grade.
characteristic of him. If you read the book, he's just a guy that takes it by the reins and just, he doesn't wait. How do I wonder how I might. And, well, no one asked me to. He's like, clears a path and just
Got to
does
get
it.
the sheet music. So I start calling sheet music places, and there's one on Woodward Avenue in Birmingham. It was right on Old Woodward, right before you get into downtown. So I go there, and I was like, I need sheet music for something called Together Wherever We Go. And suddenly they give me musical selections from Gypsy. And I was like, oh, what's that? So then Miss Shively starts coaching Bruce and I, and one day she says, oh my God, I gotta leave. I have rehearsal for Oliver. She is in Oliver at Stagecrafter. She is the flower seller in Oliver. And I'm like, well, what's Stagecrafters? And she's like, it's a theater. And I'm like, there's adults and children? And she's like, yeah, and we're doing this big show. And I'm like, Oliver, I saw that movie. Who's playing Oliver? And she's like, well, this kid.
He wants to know who's playing the lead.
And I'm like, how old is he? And she's like, he's 12. And I'm like, I'm 11. I want to play Oliver. And then, so she's telling me about Stagecrafters, and then as that year progresses, in the spring, we're doing Wizard of Oz, and she and I are after school, and I'm staying after because I want to be with Shively every minute of the day if I can, and I'm painting the Yellow Brick Road with Miss Shively, and then we're making decorations for the bicentennial concert, because it's 1976, people, and God knows what 250 years is going to get us, but we're going to find out. And she says, oh, we're going to do Oliver next year at school. And I said, I want to play Oliver. She says, no, the better part for you is the Artful Dodger. And I so appreciated how much she knew me. And then, you never know what's going to be a joke. Anyway, so all that summer between 6th and 7th grade, I am like cutting the lawn, sneezing, running my nose. I'm allergic to grass, of course. I'm sick and from it. And but all I'm thinking about is we're going to do Oliver, we're going to do Oliver, we're going to do Oliver. And I got to get back, and we got to get started rehearsal for Oliver. And I go back to the first day of 7th grade, and I run to the music room, and Miss Shively was not there. Miss Palmy was there. And I said, what happened to Miss Shively? And she said she moved. She moved to Arizona. And I never heard from her again.
What happened? Did you play the Artful Dodger?
So we didn't do Oliver, but then I said, I gotta call Stagecrafters. So I go to the white pages. It says Stagecrafters, 326 Bauer Street in something called Clawson. And I pick up the phone, and I literally just called them on a Saturday afternoon, and some lady answers, Stagecrafters. And like she sounds somewhere between like Cincinnati and Kentucky. And I was like, is there auditions ever for a play? And she said, well, the kids already chose their play, but they need 2 kids for the adult play, so hang on. And then I hear her go, are the auditions open or closed? And someone says, open. And she says, if you come on Monday night, you can audition for a play. So I said to my father, Dad, I want to go audition for a play. And you know what he said? Get in the car. And that was what he said every single time I asked him if I could go to an audition, if I could go to a play, if I could go downtown to the music hall to audition for the children's chorus of the Michigan Opera Theater. Get in the car. And
What kind of car?
oh, what month? Yeah, it was one of those situations. It might be an LTD, it might be a Hugo, it might be a Nova, whatever it was, it didn't
And
last
this
long.
guy, your dad, is a giant. He's a giant.
He's a 6'3", 250-pound man who is a 6'3", 250-pound man after he had his bariatric surgery in the late 60s, in which he lost 80 pounds. So he used to be like a 350-pound man. He was a giant, and I was a twig.
In a cardboard village, a giant inside this. I just have this image of this giant man like bursting at the seams because he sounds so full of life, so bigger than life, angry but joyous, but just a real character and difficult for your mom.
And constantly challenging for my mom. But
So-
we got in the car, and we went to Stagecrafters, and guess who I was auditioning against for that part? Oliver!
The guy who had played Oliver.
Guess who got the part? Me.
Do you ever miss performing?
Not if you and I stay right here, Doug.
It seems like you transitioned so easily when you started to go, well, from that moment, like, I'm going in the white pages. Who's doing Oliver? It's very take control, take charge. It sounds like you bypassed acting pretty easily to be in charge or pick the shows or cast it or direct it. Fair?
Yeah, I loved being in the play. And I have this other memory. So now we're going to go to 8th grade. We're really moving along fast
just
here. Doug, we're gonna get
we're
to
zooming.
Rent by 10 o'clock tonight, I guarantee it. We won't spend too much time, but it's 8th grade, and I'm in the youth theater group at Stagecrafters. They were called the Ragamuffins. Cute. And they're doing a play called The Adventures of Popcorn Pete, and I auditioned for that, and the auditions are on the day of the Super Bowl. So you find out who cares about theater and who cares about the Super Bowl. And I'm there with all the kids, and I get a part of the Jack in the Box, and I'm having a great time. And as we do the play, we're doing the play, but I have 3 observations. 1, this is a stupid title, The Adventures of Popcorn Pete. 2, this play isn't very good. Like, where's the conflict? Where's the, where is, like, I don't have the language yet to say, what is the major dramatic question? But something's, I'm like, this is not good enough. And 3, there weren't that many people in the audience. So I raised my hand and I said, well, who picks the play? And Mrs. Janney, the parent advisor, said there's a play reading committee. And I said, well, I want to be on the play reading committee. And guess what? There aren't that many 13-year-olds that want to sit around on their weekend and read plays. But I did. And I say that was the first leap that I made toward becoming this thing called a producer. Because you know what the most important job I do? Pick the play.
Yeah, pick the play. All right, we're going to race ahead a little bit. There's Tamarack,
Yay.
where Katz's Deli.
Boo. I mean, the corned beef was good, but if you had to clean that vat, it was not good. And you would not want to see what's inside.
But he's so industrious. He is working all the time. I mean, it's necessity, but you were always getting a job. You were always working.
Yeah. So I would go to the Katz's Deli, the second-hand sister of Stage, which was down the block, but Katz's had better corned beef, but it was a shit place. And the owner was mean. And I used to have to clean out the vat where they would percolate. What do you do to corned beef?
Pickle?
You steam it, you pickle it, you cook it. It was gross. And like all that fat is gathered on the sides, so you'd have to use that Brillo pad to clean it. And I'd have to clean the fat off of the grooves in the tile behind the counter when they would throw the fat down as they were making the sandwiches every night. And you do all this for $3 an hour, and then the sour waitresses would give you $1 from their tips. And they would always complain that no one showed up tonight. And I was like, yeah, hello. Why don't you get a job at Stage?
But in Tamarack, you were directing shows.
So we got through that. And then freshman year of college at Michigan, I applied to be the drama director at Specialty. And what was so great about Tamarack was that when the kids were in this division called Specialty, if they chose drama, we would do drama 3 hours every morning, Sunday through Friday morning. So we had 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. You could do something. And when I went and applied for the job, the very gentle, kind, shy program director, Elliot Sorkin, he said to me, well, you can't do this job. You're not old enough, and you're too close in age to the kids because you're only 19. And I said, I'm 18. And he said, that's what I mean. And I started saying, no, but I was on the play reading committee, and I read all these plays, and I did the publicity, and I did this, and I did that. And he didn't have anyone else to get the job, so I got the job by default.
And you worked there 2 summers.
So 3 summers.
3 summers.
And I would have 20 kids. I'd have 18 girls and 2 boys. That was always the formula. And we worked our tushies off.
And you picked the right plays for them. I'm sure you
I would pick
great
the plays we were doing at my youth theater.
Oh, so you already knew it.
No, I was like, oh, we'll do Aesop's. Well, exactly. I was like feeding in everything that I had learned.
It's like you were licensing it to them because you already had it done in your head.
And it was like 1 year after I had seen my first Broadway musical on Broadway, which was Dreamgirls. And I remember, like, I just was watching not only the actors, but how the director, choreographer, the genius Michael Bennett was staging it. And in my memory was that all the actors kept crossing from up right or up left to down. Like they were always crossing from up to down.
Diagonal.
Everything was on a diagonal from the top of the stage to the bottom of the stage. So when we were doing Aesop's Fables, I staged the whole thing to the best of my knowledge as to how
As
Michael
Bennett would do.
would have staged it. So we did the Aesop's Fables version of Dreamgirls.
Nice. Now you have to apply to college. You apply to Wayne State, Michigan, and Northwestern. Northwestern is your first choice.
Right, because I had gone to their high school cherub program, and that was yet another big thing because they would do a program in between junior, senior year every year, and for high school kids. So 120 kids come to Northwestern to study in a 5-week conservatory when they're 16. And not only did we see amazing theater like Balm Gilead at the Steppenwolf.
Wow.
And that's the first time I got to say Evita live at the Schubert.
In Chicago.
Yeah, because they had one of those sit-down national touring companies that got to Chicago before Detroit.
I wonder who was playing Evita.
It was the Wednesday matinee.
Oh, yeah.
We had the matinee Ava.
It's probably Wally Cox. Anyway,
that was another thing about that summer because maybe I had learned that summer that my talent for identifying talent was greater than my talent. And I would look and go, why did I get this part and that kid got the better, bigger part in the play? And I realized why. I was vivid, I could do double takes. He was in his body, and he was comfortable with himself. And he had an ease. And I was like, oh, he's better than me.
At this point, in terms of being gay, did you have a clue?
No, not yet.
Okay.
At that point, I'm just starting to think about it in my brain and fantasize about it in my brain, but I am not yet, it's still in here, it's not even up here or ready to go out there. And that's probably another good reason that I wasn't comfortable in my body.
Right. And in terms of applying to college, were you a good student?
So I was a good student sometimes. So if it was English, if it was social studies, I was an A+ student. If it was math, I was a C student. And if it was science, I was a C student.
Were you left to your own devices with homework? Did he help you? Did she help you?
No, because my parents, they had not gone to college, so they didn't really know. And they thought if Jeffrey's on top of it, then everything's going to be fine. My mother used to say that given all of the chaos of the house, she said this is a compliment, but it was more complicated than that. She said, you practically raised yourself. And in some ways that was true, but it's incomplete. So I didn't have someone to help me with math and science. And so I was waitlisted at Michigan.
You went up there, he took the initiative, he goes to Michigan to meet the admissions officer. He gets himself up there. I'm like, who does this?
So it's in March of senior year at Oak Park High School, so I'm like, I'm gonna make an appointment and meet him.
Because you'd been rejected from Northwestern at this point?
I'd been rejected from Northwestern, forget it.
And your safety school
is Wayne State.
And you didn't want to go to Wayne State because you
then
had
I'm
to
stuck in Cardboard Village.
Right.
And I just knew it wasn't, it's not gonna get me out of here. I gotta get out of here, I gotta get out of here. How are you gonna get out of here? You're gonna get out of here.
Because by this time you'd been to New York once and you'd seen New York shows and you were smitten. I mean, you've seen Dreamgirls.
There was only one place to go, right? But how you're gonna get there, I have no idea how I'm gonna get to New York City. But I go up and I see that admissions counselor in that ugly orange building that we all know on State Street. And by the way, I'm a teacher there now. So I guess it all worked out. But in any event, so I go there, and the guy brings me to his desk, and he goes, "So why are you here?" I'm like, "Well, I was waitlisted, and you asked for my 7th semester grades, and I got straight A's last semester, including in honors writing and in international relations, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the yearbook. So I feel like I abided by the, you asked for my grades, I gave you straight A's." And he went, 2 years of math, 2 years of science, no language. As far as I'm concerned, you've completed 2/5 of the requirements. This was the first time in my life I might have been speechless. And I said, "Thank you for your time." And I went home resigned that I'm never going to get out. And I guess I'll do the best I can at Wayne State.
We'll let you guys read what actually happens. Fast forward, at Michigan, you, is the musical theater program, which is now very famous there, that doesn't exist yet?
No, it actually starts my junior year.
Okay.
So at Michigan,
You're in the liberal arts college.
yeah,
You're in
I'm like a
LS&A.
poli-sci student,
Oh.
and I'm you know what we discovered tonight? Doug was a senior at Michigan when I was a freshman. And my freshman year, 2nd semester, I took a theater production class, and you had to do 2 things. 1, you had to work in the scene shop building sets, and 2, you had to run crew for a show. And you told me that there was one director and one show that changed your life.
Yeah. I had my own journey about, theater and musicals and getting my equity card and whatever, but there was a point at which I came back to Michigan and started taking serious acting classes and reading Stanislavski and going, oh my God, there's a toolkit and a way to get there, and it's like a craft, and it's not just get out there, and I was smitten. I just was going deep, deep dive. And this wonderful teacher named Mary Kelly was doing a season in the summer of The Three Sisters and Company and Scapan. And most of us were in 2. And I was in Three Sisters, and I played Bobby in Company for Gary Garrison. And he directed it. And that Three Sisters just changed my life. It was just getting really deep, and just, I loved it. Like, there was a way in, and there was a magical place where you arrived, and you were in the character, and you could leave yourself at the door, and she encouraged me, and she said, that's a great idea, or, yeah, sure, try it, as long as there's something behind it. Anyway, and then you had your own
So it
experience.
turned out I was on the rail running the lights for Douglas's production of The Three Sisters. I hope you looked beautiful.
No, if you could see a picture. Oh my God, I look like a sort of demented Rex
But,
Harrison.
the thing about Michigan that I think both of us could say is that at the time both of us went there, their theater program was what I call unremarkable. Like, they were doing plays, but if you are a student at the University of Michigan, you have an opportunity to get anything out of it you want. And thus, I was in Mary Kelly's production of West Side Story, and then I got to direct Grease for Soft Show. And there are so many student productions. And then I really figured out at Michigan I want to be a producer-director. And
What was that realization? Where was that? Do you remember when you had that moment when you kind of went, oh, that's what I am?
Yeah. I think it really started with, like, in high school, I started producing our concerts, and then we get to Michigan, and I'm in a couple shows. I'm Barnaby in a Hello,
Dolly.
That was fun. But then I'm like, I want to direct the show, and then I start directing it, and then but I really want to, like, be in charge of everything.
Shocking, right?
And I think that that's a way, when you feel powerless growing up, and more important, when you feel unsafe growing up, I think you want to obtain control in order to feel safe in the world.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Absolutely.
And somehow that came into it. And then it was during college that really I started to read more about Broadway. And I remember in sophomore year, that teacher, Greg Henry, handed me Contradictions, this mid-career autobiography that Hal Prince wrote.
Oh.
And he wrote about all of his shows from Pajama Game to Candide. So he only took it through like 75. But I was like, oh, that's it. I want to do that.
Yeah. When you see it and you go, yeah, that's how it was when I saw Jerry Orbach in Chicago.
Oh.
And I was like,
perfect.
that's what I want to do.
And it was that sophomore year, so much happened because sophomore year, my roommate was Andrew Lippa, who I'd gone to high school with. And we would talk about theater every night. And one night I said, you know, you play piano and you like musicals, you should write a musical. And he said, oh, that's an interesting idea. And then I said, we'll write a musical. And then I went out and found like a children's book, Jack and the Beanstalk. Or Jack the Giant Killer.
The Giant Killer.
Yeah, which is Jack and the Beanstalk is one of the Jack and the Giant Killer of tales.
Got it.
And we started writing a musical sophomore year.
Which got derailed, but we'll let you read about that.
Yeah,
More
stolen
things.
by Into the Woods.
Right.
I'm joking.
Which I could tell you stories about that. So I think I want to jump ahead to finding Jonathan, if that's okay.
With pleasure, yeah.
So there's this beautiful, he gets to New York and there's luck and drive and he finds himself in this incredible sort of PhD program on the job training in a booking office. But a friend of his says, you gotta come with me and see this thing. I heard it's good. And he goes to this little, there's 12 chairs. I mean, there's folding chairs. It sounds like it was nothing. And Jonathan Larson steps out and
I'm 25 years old, and what's going on in my life at this moment is that, number one, I'm in a job as a booker, booking the national tours of shows for the producers Barry and Fran Weissler. Been doing it for 3 years. I know I don't like it anymore. It doesn't give me a sense of satisfaction or fulfillment, and it's become a grind. And I can't quit because I can't afford to quit. I have to pay my student loan every month. I don't have any money. And I've just broken up from my first big relationship after 6 years, a relationship that I naively, because I was a naive 20-something, thought would go forever. And when you break up from that first relationship and you're 25, I was lonely, I was scared, and I thought I'm never gonna meet anyone again. And I was wondering, will I ever, I'm never gonna become a producer because I don't have any money. Right. And there's no shows on Broadway anyway. You know, these are pretty bleak days on Broadway back.
not to mention the AIDS crisis is now.
Not to mention now I'm not in a relationship, so who am I? So I'm absolutely terrified of AIDS because I'm also terrified of death. Anyway, so with all that in mind, my friend says, come, this is a rock monologue. What? A rock monologue. What's a rock monologue? I'd never even heard the word rock. So this is going to be a one-man show. One guy's going to talk a lot, but he's not going to talk because it's rock, so he's going to sing a lot. And I thought, that is a cool idea. So we go up to this space, and out comes this tall, lanky, curly-haired man who attacks the piano ferociously. And what is he singing about? He's the 30-year-old composer of rock musicals that nobody wants to produce. He has an opportunity to get a job as a copywriter at an ad agency, which will finally enable him to have health insurance and something of a life. Maybe he can move out of his 4th floor walk-up on Greenwich Street, in which the bathtub is genuinely in the kitchen. And he is in a relationship with a woman who he really cares for, but he knows she's not the right person for him. And he's asking himself, do I stay with her because it's safe, or do I have the courage to break up? And he's telling the story through these songs that are thrilling me and making me cry and making the hair on my arms stand up. And I'm like, how does this man, I've never seen this man before in my life, and yet he's telling my life story. That's called theater. So being shy, I didn't go introduce myself to him at the little party after that night, but
In the audience that night, how many people?
75.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 75. But here's what I do. I wrote him a letter the next day saying, my name is Jeffrey Seller, and I want to produce your musicals.
So this is the beginning of picking correctly. So this is the key to his success. When the hairs go up on his arms or on the back of his neck, he's seeing something that he is motivated to, and the book is just wonderful in describing how you find these things in your life that change the course. So you and he begin this relationship. Also characteristic of Jeffrey is how to treat the actor. With a lot of producers, it's about finance and negotiations and the unions and picking the theater. But for Jeffrey, the relationship with the creator is primary. How do we get close enough where we're doing it together? And I can watch it for you and tell you what worked for me and what doesn't work for me, and I don't want you to think I'm overly critical. I'm just trying to help us get to a place. And he has incredible taste about structure. You use the phrase, major dramatic question. Now, that's a phrase I use, but I never met anybody else who knows it other than Gary Garrison. Did you learn it at Michigan in a book called Write That Play?
He may have taught my musical,
Anyway.
my theater history course.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I remember being a student at Michigan and learning about what is the major dramatic question? What is the exposition? Where is the rising action? When is the crisis? When is the point of no return?
Complication, crisis, climax, denouement.
And that is how I think of everything.
Well, that's the custom. That's what we're used to. That's what makes us comfortable as Westerns, when people of Western culture. That's what we are accustomed to. It makes us feel warm. We know where we're going. We're in safe hands. So he just has great taste, and you'll see how he chooses the things that excite him. But that was a show called, at that time, Boho Days, right?
Yeah, so that show about the 30-year-old composer was called Boho Days. He persuades me to produce it. I say to him, well, you keep using this motif in the show called tick, that you feel on their 30th birthday. You keep hearing this thing, tick, tick, boom, because he feels at age 30 that his head's about to explode, that if he doesn't succeed soon, he will explode. So I said, well, that's the title of your show. And then it became...
That's ballsy. You told him to change the title of the show the first time you meet him? Did you say it the first time?
No, but I waited till the second time.
Love that. I love that.
And then I said, and by the way, your opening number's no good. It was called Boho Days. This is the life, Boho Days. This is the, and I was like, no, that's not good enough. And he went back and he wrote a new song called 3090, and that became the opening number. And then Tick, Tick, Boom, many of you may know because it's a movie starring Andrew Garfield, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda.
But that was first, and then he says, I'm thinking of this other...
Right, so then a fun thing happens. We're sitting in that kitchen with a bathtub and drinking tea.
Washing dishes as we shower.
And I'm pitching him on an idea, which is I want him to think about taking the Mozart opera Don Giovanni and making it into a musical called Don Juan and putting it in Harlem. And it's based on a beautiful opera version of Don Giovanni I saw directed by Peter Sellers. No relation. Jonathan goes, that might be a good idea for Madonna. And then he said, but I'm working on a new version of La Boheme in which Paris becomes the East Village. And instead of having tuberculosis, Mimi will have AIDS. And I went, I'm in. That's a genius idea.
And no one is writing about present day. What are you seeing on stages at that point?
So this is call it 1991. What are we seeing? We know what we're seeing. were seeing the entire musical theater business at that moment was completely held up by 4 pillars: Cats, Phantom, Les Mis, and Miss Saigon. And if you subtracted those 4 musicals from Broadway, there basically was no Broadway. In fact, in around 1991 or 90, there is a year in which a musical called Jerome Robbins' Broadway wins for Best Musical, and it was a review of all of Jerome Robbins' shows. It was a beautiful show, but folks, it was not a musical. And it beat a review from France called Black and Blue, and some weird little musical about a singing reptile. And I can't remember, I'll think of the name, and when I do, I'll just blur it out. But I can't think of it right now. No, it was played by Gabriel Barry, good guy, but he played the reptile. He got nominated for a Tony.
You're kidding.
But anyway, my point is there were no new musicals.
And certainly no plays or musicals that are talking about present day.
Yeah, and so Jonathan, this kid born in 1961 or 60, he loves Billy Joel, and he loves Bruce Springsteen, and he loves Elton John, and he loves Fiddler on the Roof, and he loves West Side Story. And he says about the musicals on Broadway, those aren't our stories, those aren't our characters, that's not our music. And I'm gonna change that.
Wow. And I was touring in Into the Woods on the first national tour when that was like 89, 90.
Yeah.
And so we're going around the country, and those shows are, so I was like, yeah, I don't really need to go back, because those shows didn't interest me.
Because you couldn't even play a part in them, really. And but that, I mean, it's not about
No,
you.
you're right,
It's
yeah.
about who do we remember playing those parts? Nobody. There's something about those shows that make them, without the need for soul or character, they're carried by something else, is what my...
I mean, I will say, I saw Les Mis in London, and it was, heroic, and the score was huge, and
But any actor
sumptuous.
could do it,
Yeah.
and that's been proven over 40 years, because every actor does do it.
By the time it came to me, I was like, yeah, it's the 10th anniversary.
Give it to someone else.
Yeah, let somebody else do it.
But, so Jonathan, he had a vision. And the vision
And so did
was-
you, but he had you. You guys did it in tandem. He couldn't do it alone.
I believed it. I was moved by it. I was like, yeah, that's what I want to see too. Because I had that experience watching Boho Days in seeing how profound it is when you feel it in your guts or in your kishkas if you're at the JCC.
Did you hook him up with his book writer?
He was his book writer.
Oh, he did both.
He
I don't
wrote
know why I
everything.
thought- Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you get him into New York Theater Workshop?
What happens is he's kind of like me. He sees the New York Theater Workshop on his bicycle, and he walks in there with the script and says, I want to do my show at this theater. And meets the man who
Jim
becomes our artistic director, Jim Nicola. And ultimately, they do a reading for him in the spring of '93. It's the first reading ever. I come to the reading.
And you don't have a proprietary hold on the piece yet.
No,
You're
not
just
at all.
friend of the author.
I'm a friend.
And
I
you're
come-
still at your booking office.
I'm booking by day, and he's doing a reading in June of '93, and that day I bring along with me this guy I've just met, and he's an Australian wannabe producer. He's very tall, he's very handsome, and it also just so happens that his mother, I know, owns the largest theater chain in London. So I thought, if he likes it, he'll pay for it.
Smart.
And then I bring this other guy with me who wants to direct. And Rent starts, and the opening number is like, bam, it's Rent. And then it just devolves into this bizarre collage of life in the East Village. And the first act is about an hour and 35 minutes, and the air conditioning doesn't work. And at intermission, the handsome, rich Australian dude looks at me and he says, I'm so sorry, I didn't know it'd be this long, I have to leave. And of course, that's the Australian way of saying, I hate your show and I can't get out of here fast enough.
And the director?
He says at the end, I really like Jonathan, but he should just start working on something else.
But you stuck with it.
So then I am thinking, what am I going to say to
Are
Jonathan?
you doubting your taste at this point? Or
No, I'm just like, oh, that didn't work. But I'm just, no. And then Jonathan's like, let's go. I want to hear what you have to say. So I'm like, how, now this is another huge moment in the life of a young producer. How do I communicate in the most humane but productive way with an artist? How do I deliver criticism? How do I say, it's not good enough? So we go to this place called Diane's Hamburgers. I'm sure you went there, Doug. You could buy like a hamburger and a Coke for like $6. People had carved their initials into the table. It was on Columbus and 71st. And he's like, well, what did you think? And I'm like, oh, shit. And I, so I lead with, well, like that opening number, it's a wallop. And the rhythm, like the currency of those songs is so powerful. And I said, I don't know if you're trying to write a review collage of life in the East Village or if you're trying to tell a story, because I can't follow the story. I can't attach to the characters. I don't know what's going on. He goes, I want to write a story. And I said, then you've got to go write the story, because right now it's not coming through.
And when do you hook him up with the director?
Then Jim Nicola hooked. Once again, Jonathan's like, I want Michael Greif, because Michael had directed this amazing production of Mackinac at the Public. So he chose his director. And then he and Michael started working.
And that was fateful. I mean,
And that helped to leapfrog us forward, because when they did another workshop 18 months later, financed by a Richard Rogers Foundation grant, which is a good testament to how in our business it takes philanthropy from the successful and the old guard to help the young get started. So with a grant from the Richard Rogers Foundation, Jonathan and Michael go to work and do another workshop. And now I come down again on a rainy night in November, and I bring with me my business partner, Kevin McCullum, and we sit in the front row. And I have to tell you, I'm both scared, but I'm excited, because I'm always waiting for that moment where he's solved it, where he's cracked it, where it comes alive. And lo and behold, we sit in those chairs, and the opening number is still a wallop, Rent. And then when 20 minutes in, you hear the knock, 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 and you hear Mimi come in, and Mimi and Roger start Light My Candle. It is one of the greatest rock duets in theater history. And at that moment, I knew we had a show.
Wow.
And then Kevin, at intermission, said, get out the checkbook.
That was a great partnership, you and Kevin.
20 years.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. So there's an amazing thing that happens, it's theater history, that happens to Jeffrey with this Rent. I don't know if you recognize this. Rent won the Pulitzer Prize, but they get themselves into a tech rehearsal, and they do a final dress, and
should I take it from there? So on January 25th of 96, there's a final dress rehearsal of Rent. I come into the theater. Family and friends are in the audience. And the show is... This is at the New York Theater Workshop, East 4th Street. And the show is fantastic, messy, chaotic, brilliant, but it's there. And after the show, I see Jonathan, and I know he's not been feeling well, and he says, I've been sick, I had to go to the hospital, I don't feel well, I need to go home, but I congratulate him, and I can tell that he's disturbed, And in some way, I think he's like, fuck you, Jeffrey. You've been criticizing my show for 2 years. I finally got it right. But that's just me. And I schmoozed with Michael after the show. And the last thing I see is Jonathan has an interview for the first time in his life with the New York Times. And the only place where they can get quiet is in the box office. So as I'm leaving the theater that night, I see Jonathan sitting in the box office with Anthony Tomasini, the chief music critic of the New York Times, who's going to interview him. And the reason is because our ingenious press agent realized it was the 100th anniversary in 1996 of La Boheme, of Puccini's piece. So he was able to persuade the New York Times to write a piece about this new La Boheme on the 100th anniversary of that original La Boheme. And so it's a great night, and I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning, and I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to wear to the first preview? It's going to be so exciting tonight. And I'm picking my clothes, and I trudge across Central Park to go to the psychoanalysis appointment to try to work out my chaotic family from my childhood. And then I get on the R train, and I go to the office, and when I get to the office, everybody's looking down, and it's silent. This is our booking office. And the receptionist doesn't look at me, and then the assistant doesn't look at me, and then I start to go to my office, and then our contract manager named John Corker says, Jeffrey, I have something to tell you. We just got a call from Jay Harris, Jonathan's lawyer, and Jonathan died last night. And I fell against the frame of the door. What? Jonathan died in his apartment last night, 2 hours after the final dress rehearsal. And somehow, I was in shock. And I knew at that moment Jonathan was going to become legendary. I knew at that moment that he was going to make history. Because if we all know Rent, and my guess is if you're here, you probably know Rent, Jonathan became a character in his own musical. How do you ever listen to one song, Glory, one song, Before I Go, and not ask, how did Jonathan write his own life and his own death? How did he write, living in America at the end of the millennium, you are what you own, and then die? I met his parents that night. It was going to be our first preview. And I got on the phone with Jim Nicola at New York Theater Workshop, and he had talked to Michael, and he said, you know what? Everybody's too unstable. We don't think it will be safe to try to do the first performance. So what we thought we would do is just sit at the table, and we'll sing the show. We'll do a reading, because we don't think we can. And it's just going to be for family and friends. So that night, we canceled the public performance and filed into the theater. And his parents, Al and Nan Larson, who lived in Albuquerque, they learned about his death when I guess someone called them at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning. And I was nervous to meet them. What do you say to a mom and a dad who just learned that their son died 14 hours ago? But at intermission, they said, you must do this show. You must do Johnny's show.
Did he talk to them often? Had he talked to them about you?
Yeah. They're like, he talked about you all the time. Yeah.
But you had not met them or talked to them before that?
No. Though I'd heard about them from, Tick Tick Boom. They were practically in Rent, because when you hear all those, those voice calls from his mother, you can assume that was Nan Larson.
And they were supposed to, the idea was they would sit cautiously and sing and tell the story of the show, but something happens midway through that.
Yeah, by the time we got to La Vie Boheme at the end of Act 1, Daphne Rubin Vega will not be stopped. So she gets on that table and starts dancing. And then Wilson Germain Heredia, who plays Angel, he gets up on that table. And then the whole cast got on the table. And then they did Act 2.
Wow. And, it's tremendous. It's complete, legend and history, and changed the course of theater and so then the arts in New York, which is the center of culture for the country in some ways. So it was, there's so much more to tell about it, which you do in the book, which you will enjoy hearing how they coped with that. And then, Jeffrey, like a sports car has like a fifth gear. When everyone else is in fourth and everyone's out of energy, Jeffrey has a fifth gear, it seems. And the way he handles PR, and he's so particular about how things are handled and how to move forward in a certain set of circumstances, and who to get to take pictures, or whatever it is, or what is the article, or what does the ad look like, or how do we cope with this problem. And it's completely engrossing. I think you'll really love it. But we should sort of talk a little bit about, yikes.
I'd say I didn't warn you. It's not 10 o'clock.
I know, right. I just want to talk a little bit about Hamilton, and you finding Lynn, and Lynn finding you, and just this remarkable thing that also changed the course of theater for us, and so the arts, and was all meshed together with the arrival of the Obamas, and how that sort of nexus happened that lifted a lot of us up about hope and what's possible. And that was just, so I had a friend from a workshop I was doing of a show called Finding Neverland, just a workshop, and he said, I'm doing this thing at the same time, this thing called Hamilton Mixtape. Do you want to come? They're doing it like, and I thought he was very handsome, so I said, yes, I'll come. And it was like 4 performances. It was a Sunday. It was 10 a.m. I'm like, nobody gets up at 10 a.m. to go see theater. So I have this giant cup of coffee with 3 shots of espresso in, and I'm walking to the thing, and I see this thing called Hamilton Mixtape, and I was half asleep when I arrived, and we're all on bleachers, and the cast is there, and they stage the first half, in partial costumes. They're muslin, and they're traditional garb from that period, but at the same time they have this modern take. So there's no sleeves, so the guy's arms are showing, and the movement is it's just shocking. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It woke me up, and I was like, this can't go on. This can't possibly go on. And 5 minutes becomes 10, becomes 15. I'm like, well, no, everybody, it'll poop out. The whole thing will fall apart. And it doesn't fall apart. And then there's this other thing. The King comes out, and he's hysterically funny and scary. And Brian Darcy James is playing the part, who's, he's just an amazing guy from Saginaw. It was just remarkable. And there was intermission, and there were people there that were really important. And I just couldn't believe what I was saying. I said, well, it's going to fall apart in the second act. Everybody falls apart in the second act, and the second act's never as good. And they sat in chairs. They hadn't staged the second act yet. And it was every bit as engaging, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it sort of took my breath away for the first time. I can't remember the last. It was just shocking. And as I left, I saw Lynn, and I saw Jeffrey, and I shook their hands, and I was sort of out of it, and I just said as briefly as I could, because I wasn't close friends with them, but just wanted to congratulate them. But on the way home, I tried to get a hold of one of the producers, Roy Furman's daughter, Jill Furman. She's his daughter, right? Yeah. And I tried to call Jeffrey, and I said, whatever you would let me do, I would put my savings into this. I didn't know anything more than what I'd seen, but I just said, if you let me, I'll put whatever I can into it. And by then, of course, they knew what they had, I think, and they had plenty. They didn't need my money. But it was a remarkable day, and this partnership with Lynn produced this extraordinary thing. Where did you go after that?
I say, everything that happens after all the great musicals of the last 29 years post-Rent, they're sitting on Jonathan's shoulders. Because here's the deal. When Lynn is a junior in high school, at Hunter High School, he brings his girlfriend and they sit in the mezzanine at Rent at the Niederlander Theater. And when Lynn sees Rent, he says, I can write a musical about my neighborhood, about my family, about my friends, with the music of the streets of Washington Heights. And then we get in the Heights. And when I see the first time we do a staged reading, that's when all the actors sing and read the show with music stands in front of them. I'm not a rap aficionado, and out comes Lynn singing this warm, enveloping, inviting Caribbean rap, lights up on Washington Heights. And I'm completely engaged. And then when the Broadway choir comes behind him and sings In the Heights, I've never heard choral music and rap music married together so beautifully. I've never heard them married together at all. Better yet, so beautifully. And the hair on my arms goes up, and I know I'm in. And that leads to In the Heights. And then In the Heights leads to Hamilton, when, after Lynn has been performing as Usnavi, the narrator, for 9 months, he finally gets that 1-week vacation, and he and his then girlfriend, Vanessa, soon to be his wife, they decide they're gonna go to Mexico and just hang out for a week, but he stops by the Borders bookshop, and before he gets on the plane, he sees a book called Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. Folks, this is a 900-page book, and he decides to take it to the Mexican Caribbean. Now you know what you're dealing with. That's his idea of vacation reading. But he takes the book, and we have this wonderful picture of Lynn on the on the raft reading Alexander Hamilton. And he reads that book, and he says, well, this is a rap musical. That's ingenuity, my friends.
Now, the big thing about Hamilton, I'm sure many have seen it, right? If you didn't, right? You saw it on stage? Extraordinary. Or you saw the televised version of the movie shot, which was just glorious, and they spent a lot of money on it, and it was well spent. It was just so often, as you know, stage doesn't lend itself to being filmed. In this case, they took a lot of time and care, and the concept of race and how it mixes with the story of our founding fathers is sort of essential to the piece. And everybody talks about it. It's not just rap, but the founding fathers are depicted as people of color, which is sort of an anathema to how we're always used to see them. Everybody's seen 1776, right? So that was just extraordinary, and I wonder if you would address it. Was that an important part of things?
It was organic. And what I mean is, let's think about like form and function. Form is the show he wrote. Function is how we make it work, right? He wrote a show in rap. So it made perfect sense that you were gonna get African Americans to sing that rap, because that is their vernacular. It made perfect sense that you were going to cast our friend Chris Jackson to play George Washington when you heard the music that he had written for George Washington. So for us, it was never a conversation about race. It was just, how are we going to have function serve the form? And if you follow that, you will have Chris Jackson playing George Washington and Leslie Odom Jr. playing Aaron Burr and Renee Elise Goldsberry playing Angelica Schuyler.
Who, by the way, went to Kingswood.
True that.
Yeah. Well.
And so in that way, it was easier than you think, because we were just following the play. And frankly, go back to Rent. And Rent had a completely diverse cast from the day forward because we were following the play. We were letting the function serve the form.
Tell me one big argument the team had amongst you about creating Hamilton. Just pick something you guys didn't agree about that was an important element. Or was it all easy and everybody agreed all the time?
Yeah. I could certainly find arguments from many shows in the past. I cannot come up with one creative I'm going to give you one because you asked, and it's one that is never talked about in the press, but I'm going to give you one. But there was never a creative argument. I sometimes say about Hamilton that though I am a sometimes observant cultural Jew and an atheist, that Hamilton's writing may have been divine. That God must have been channeling through Lynn somehow, because it's just that good. He wrote the opening number, and it never stopped being the opening number. And Doug, you and I know shows go through a lot of iterations sometimes to find the opening number. Fiddler on the Roof almost didn't work because they couldn't find an opening number. And finally, after Jerry Robbins said to the writing team, Bach and Harnick, over and what is it about? What is it about? What is it about? Finally, they said, tradition! He said, go write the song.
And which previewed here.
Here at the Fisher Theater.
At the Fisher
You bet.
Theater.
In any event, so my point is, like, so many shows, you have to go through so many iterations. The opening number to Hamilton was the opening number to Hamilton. Then he wrote My Shot, and it never changed being My Shot. And then he wrote the third song, and it never changed being the third song. So that's what I mean by divine. Here was the only argument. And it wasn't an argument, it was a discussion. Because we love each other too much to have an argument. We had opened at the Public Theater in mid-February of 2015. It was an okay season on Broadway, but not the greatest season on Broadway. And the show was immediately lightning in a bottle. And there was a great possibility that if we worked really fast, we could open that season up. We could open at the Public Theater on February 15th, and then get open on Broadway by the Tony deadline, which we know to be about April 30th. And it would have been like trying to mount a war to get open that fast. But I had done it with Rent 20 years before, so I was like, we did it before, we can do it again.
By the way, he's on his own now. It's in the book, it's wonderful, but he and his longtime partner, Jeffrey, decided, I want to be on my own. There's things I want to do, I don't want to...
So Kevin and I had ended
Sorry,
our...
did I say Kevin?
Yeah, no, but he and I ended the partnership.
Right.
And part of it was because I wanted to make these decisions solo. So, I started a conversation with one of my best friends and colleague, Thomas Kail, the director, one of my best friends and colleague, Lynn, about what to do. And at some point, while we're talking about, should we open now and move Mountains to open by April 30th so we can be a part of this year Tony season, or do we wait and open in the summer, which means we'd open in July or August, but then we wouldn't have our Tony season until the next June. So we just talk about it nonstop, and finally Lynn says, guys, I have to do the show every night, you guys decide. Tommy, you and Jeffrey decide. And Tommy and I just keep talking, and I'm like, I think I want to do it, I think we should do it. And finally Tommy called me, and he said, Jeffrey, we only get to open once. I need the time. And I said, okay, let's go. We'll open in July. And that's what we did, and it kind of worked out.
What was was that the creative difference?
That's it, that's the argument.
That wasn't much of an argument.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That was juicy. So then you have to keep everybody in mind. When you open that early, before the Tonys, you've got to keep everybody,
Right,
in
so
love
my
with it.
thing was like, okay, if I'm gonna open in July, how am I gonna keep this the hottest show in the country for 11 months? And I thought of it like the 12 Days of Christmas. And what I thought is, I have to have an event, something that makes news every month from the time we open until the Tonys. And guess what? We kind of did it. Because all it kept doing was getting hotter. And by the time we got to the Tonys 11 months later, Hamilton was one of the biggest shows with the biggest advance in Broadway history. And we were selling even more tickets the next June than we were selling when we opened.
Now, when you buy the book, you will read this incredible when the vice president-elect, Mike Pence, wants to come see the show.
That was a lot of vocalizing.
And it's an interesting moment in time, which we don't have time to do, but I urge you to enjoy it. You're gonna love it. I have a couple questions I want to ask you before we have to wrap, I'm sure, because we're way late. Will you just address for a second incubation? We don't have a great incubator in this country. We never had for new musicals. For example, in England, they have a national theater and they can incubate more easily. What do you prescribe? Now that we've sort of put on hold this other theater, a big national theater, the Kennedy Center for now is in a state of, I'm not sure. What do you think? How do we birth these new things if we don't have an incubator? It seems like all the responsibility falls to the philanthropists and these theaters that are dependent on the NEA, which is now in question. How do you move forward? Where do people find a place to birth these things?
I could answer that question in a positive way and a negative way. I'm gonna go positive. But well, let me first start by saying our biggest enemy is multitasking. And what that I mean is that every composer, lyricist, book writer, director has to take so many projects to make a living that when I get with my team and I say, when can all of you get together for 2 weeks? It's, oh, well, we might be able to get a week together in June, and we made that plan in March. I mean, it's like, and that is so different because back in the day at Bach and Harnick and Fiddler on the Roof, they just went to work every day. They made Gypsy from beginning to opening in 1 year. Same for West Side Story.
And even now, when you get them together, sometimes it's on Zoom. They're not even in the same room.
Correct. So multitasking is our enemy, and when artists are exclusively working on one project, the results are often better. And my job is to figure out how can I help them to multitask less. And
So you have
it's
to pay
hard.
that. It's money.
You have to pay them, but yeah.
They have families and they have
Yeah.
mortgages, and
Yeah.
we have to figure out.
You know,
how to-
the other problem we have, and it's been true since the beginning, which is that the explosion of streaming gave a lot of good work to theater people. A lot of great work.
Thank you,
The Gilded Age. You know, this man stars in The Gilded Age, which is coming back in June. And God, do I love that show. It's all about the opera. We didn't
It
even
is
get
all
to the
about the
opera.
opera, that's right.
Anyway, and it gave so much great work to theater people, but it also took them away from the theater. But here's the deal. They can make a real living when they do movies and television. And our advances are just so small. But here's the other thing. When you are an author in the theater, you own your work forever. Which means that when Sheldon Harnick and Jerry Bach wrote Fiddler on the Roof, and their advance was $3,000 or something from Hal Prince, they made tens of millions of dollars for the rest of their lives, and their offspring will benefit from it for the 100 years you get to have a work that's owned by you. Because in the theater, the author is the king, not the studio. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Hence the Dramatists Guild, which
Yeah.
represents those playwrights, and they hold on to their project. As opposed to in movies and television, you're a hired gun. You write it, and then you don't own it. They do whatever they want to it, and your name is still on it. Sometimes you can fight and have your name taken off of it, but that's the difference,
Yeah.
or one of the many differences. What do you feel about this thing that happened, I'm not sure how many years ago, where investors get to be called producers and take home Tony Awards?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems so demeaning to me when somebody says, I'm producing, and I'm like, you're not producing. You're putting money in it. You're a wonderful investor. You're an angel. You're writing a check. You're going to some of the meetings. You might come to, but the person or people making the decisions are the producers, and yet now you get 20 people to go up on stage. You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
there's 40 or 50 now.
Right, so how do you feel about it? I mean, it's a way to
Well,
bring people in.
fortunately, because I produced Rent when I started,
You have money.
I don't have to do the 50 people. But mine will have 8 people. You know what I mean? I will have to give some. Here's the deal. We no longer live in the age of David Merrick presents, Hal Prince presents, Cameron McIntosh presents. And there was a time where people would invest in a show with pleasure, they'd send in their check, and if it worked, they were happy, and if it didn't work, they didn't really care, and they were just happy to be involved. But something changed, which is called economics. Broadway receives no benefits from technology or efficiencies, which means that our rate of inflation is faster and higher than other businesses. By the way, same thing for healthcare, hello. Same thing for higher education. And that's why you see why we're all complaining about tuition. It's because no efficiencies. And if you want good teachers, and it's just when you are labor intensive and you cannot replace labor, you are going to cost more. And that cost led Broadway shows to go from 1 million to Rent costs $3.5 million. Avenue Q cost $3.5 million. Hamilton only cost $12 million. Sweeney Todd 2 years ago cost $13 million. I have not yet had to raise $20 million, but I am working on my next musical, and it will cost $20 million. And I have to go raise $20 million. And the offshoot of that is that a lot of producers, to get that money, needed to give people billing, because suddenly you held out the possibility of winning a Tony Award for a $150,000 investment. I'm not going to judge it, because it's also true we have 13 new musicals on Broadway this season, so a lot of people put a lot of money in. But
So it's a trade-off that you
it
don't
has
have a problem
changed the word producer, and maybe we need a new word.
So tell me one last question. Tell me how being a Jewish kid from Detroit affects the decisions that you make.
I can't separate where I come from, where I grew up, and who I am as a Jew, as an adoptee, as a gay man with 2 beautiful children, as a Democrat. From how I look at the world and view the world, and then make decisions about how to operate in it. And as an example, when there was a coup at the Kennedy Center in February, I'm going to say something. The Kennedy Center was founded in the administration of Dwight Eisenhower. That's when they decided they wanted to build the Kennedy Center in a Republican administration. It was built during the Johnson administration and the Nixon administration. It was opened in the Nixon administration with Leonard Bernstein's Mass in the early 70s. It has been a bipartisan and nonpartisan beacon of American culture since it opened in 1973. And it was always run by professionals, and and every president got to put members on the board, and for the most part, the board of directors were 50-50 Democrats and Republicans, and we have all seen the beautiful benefits that it has reaped for all of those years. When Hamilton played at the Kennedy Center in 2018, it was during the first Trump administration, because it was still a nonpartisan, neutral organization run by professionals with a bipartisan board. And we had a fantastic engagement. And frankly, we've now gone there twice. And what we saw in February is that the new president fired the professional who runs it, put in this political lackey of his, who is completely partisan and and odious. By the way, gay man too. Awful man. He fired every single member of the board who was a Democrat, and then he installed new Republican members and said they had voted him to be the chairman of the board, and fired David Rubenstein, who, by the way, has been a very bipartisan, nonpartisan venture capital guy for 50 years, works with everybody. He gave more money to the Kennedy Center than any other individual in the life of the Kennedy Center, David Rubenstein. Worked with Democrats, worked with Republicans all the time. Fired David Rubenstein, fired Deborah Ritter, got rid of the board, put in this guy, Rick Grinnell, odious man, had never stepped foot in the Kennedy Center, knew nothing about performing arts. And I called Lynn and said, we're supposed to play there next year. It was already announced as part of their 250th anniversary of the United States of America. And I don't think we can do it. And Lynn said, I agree. And then we just had to figure out how, because I was like, we will not allow the Kennedy Center to reap profits from Hamilton to pursue their agenda. And that's the kind of decision I make as a Detroiter, as a Democrat, as a gay kid, a Jewish kid, and an adopted kid.
We've left off so many stories. Wait till you read how this guy made Avenue Q the best musical. It's an extraordinary, because Wicked and Avenue Q were competing to be best musical. And talk about David and Goliath. It's sort of genius. You're going to get a kick out of it. And this is just the smallest amount of wonderful things that he puts in, and he's very candid in many ways, and it makes it a very special memoir. So I think that's what we were here to do today, to give you a taste, and I hope you got a taste, and look forward to Jeffrey's next shows. Is there anything you want to say about what you're working on?
No, I won't tell you anything I'm specifically aware of, but I am, because I love to work with people I've worked for. I'm working with Bobby Lopez, the creator of Avenue Q and Book of Mormon, and with he and his wife, the creators of Frozen. And so my next musical has a score by Bobby Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, and I'm having a great time being with Bobby again. I want to thank you all for coming. You know, I still give I give a lot of parties at my house, and even when people say they're coming, I'm always afraid no one's going to come. So I was afraid no one was going to come, but you're here, and I'm so happy. I'm going to sign some books after. I'm going to meet some folks after, and the next thing I'm going to say, the JCC is going to hate me for, but govern yourselves accordingly. So there's a room, I don't know, Pearls, I don't know what the name of the room is. There's a room, I have a bar, I have a bartender, there's a drink on me after the show. It's for my family and friends, and if you qualify, you decide, come to the bar, have a drink. I'll be outside signing books and saying hello. And from the bottom of my heart, coming here on the day that my book came out was just the perfect, most wonderful activity that I could do, and I thank you.
Thank you all for coming this evening. My name is Heidi Budai, and I'm chair of this year's book fair. We can't thank you enough. Jeffrey will be signing books right out in the lobby, and if you qualify as a family member or a friend, please join us in Handelman Hall, and have a great evening. Thank you for coming, everyone.